This is Andrés with the Sangeet School Intro to Western Music video series. In our third video, we are going to discuss medieval music from around the year 500 to 1400 CE, and these will be our topics of conversation. Let's go first to notation, which is, say, writing down music. Now, if you remember from the last video, when the Roman Empire fell in 476, and really for many years before then, we lost a lot of knowledge, and among the knowledge that we lost was a system of notation. So that system that we saw in the Greek song and the Hurrian song from last video, that's lost. In fact, one philosopher went so far as to say that unless sounds are notated, they are lost to mankind forever. Because there was no known way of writing them down. Western civilization then had to come up with a new system from scratch, and here is the story of notation in three pictures. First, people came up with this system of unheightened neumes. Now, these songs were still kind of the same throughout the Dark Ages, around 400 or 500 to around the year 800 or 900 CE. But there was no way of writing them down, so they had to be passed down orally. So the older generation would teach them to the younger generation, and they would memorize them, and then they would pass them down to the next generation, and so on and so forth. Which was very efficient, but also certainly resulted in some small changes throughout the centuries. This system was a kind of memory system in which these neumes, these markings above the text, give the singers an idea of the shape of the song. They don't tell you exactly what note it is. They don't tell you, for example, if this note is higher or if this note is higher, but they do give you an idea and help you remember it if you already know the song. Now, later, there was this system of heightened neumes. Unlike the unheightened ones, where how far above the text they were didn't matter, in this case it does matter how far above the text they are, and we even have this nifty red line to help us figure it out. Now we have a much better idea of the difference between subsequent notes. So this is a bunch of the same note, and then it goes higher, and then it goes lower. Here it's a little less clear if this one is lower or if it's still the same note, but this is a big step towards being able to figure out a song. With this one, if you've never seen the song before and you try to sing it using this, you might not get it quite right, but you will probably come fairly close. However, we eventually get square notation, which is very exact. It tells you not only exactly what note to sing. Now we have 4 red lines forming what we call a staff. And this staff holds our notes and tells us exactly what the notes are and how long they last. This is a pretty standard example of what a piece of paper, a piece of manuscript notation from around the 1300s or late 1200s looks like. So that's the story of notation in the medieval period in 3 pictures. Here is a small clip of modern notation. And there is a catch with this system of notation. It lets us preserve music for the first time in many centuries, but it's only used to preserve one type of music, which is to say sacred music. Church music, Catholic church music used in masses and things like that. If you don't know what I mean by Gregorian chant, I'll play you a small excerpt. It's probably something you'd imagine hearing in a church even to this day in some places. So you see there's our new system of notation. Okay, so this is what is called Gregorian chant, which is the official chant of the Catholic Church. And it's called Gregorian chant because of this guy, Pope Gregory I, also known as Pope Gregory the Great. Here is a dove. The legend goes that the Holy Spirit in the form of a dove, right here, flew down from heaven and whispered the melodies into Pope Gregory's ear, who then had his scribes write them down. Here's a scribe. This, to people who study music, seems a little bit far-fetched, not so much because of the idea of the Holy Spirit becoming a dove flying down and whispering into the ear, but because Pope Gregory I died in the year 604, which is about 200 or 300 years before our unheightened neumes that we saw earlier, our first somewhat modern system of notation. So it doesn't seem likely that that's the truth. A much more likely story is that chants that already existed and were being passed down in Rome and in all of the Italian peninsula got mixed together with Frankish chants. The Franks were the precursor to France, to modern day France. Here is the most famous Frankish king, Charlemagne, being crowned by another pope. And it seems likely that chants from the Frankish regions of Europe and the Italian regions of Europe kind of mixed together, and it was these chants that already existed that were just notated down whenever we figure out a way to do it. And this is kind of what it would look like when the chants are being sung in a church. And I stumbled there, almost said performed, but I didn't. I meant not to, because they were not performances. They were not concerts. They were practical music being used in masses, in church services. And these masses were most of the time different pieces, different sections of the mass being compiled, being put together from a lot of different places. So some written by different composers, maybe some written by anonymous people, because there is a lot of music written by anonymous people from the medieval period, until a French composer, and we move on to our last section, wrote the first mass written by a single composer, and his name is Guillaume de Machaut. Lived from around 1300 to 1377 CE. And he wrote a lot of sacred music, the most famous being the Notre Dame Mass that I just mentioned, and also a lot of secular music, which is to say popular music. And here is a picture of Machaut. There he is. Nature offers Machaut 3 of her children, sense, rhetoric, and music. Because Machaut was also a very famous and prolific poet. And I'll play you a little bit of the Notre Dame Mass. I highly recommend you go listen to the whole thing because it is wonderful. So you notice we've got, instead of just one part like the earlier Gregorian chant, we have a lot of different parts going on. We call this polyphony. And we'll move over to the secular music. Really do take a listen to that mass. But here are different kinds of popular music from the day. Ballade and rondo and motets and virelais. And these are just rhyme schemes, essentially. These are names of some of his better-known songs. And I'm going to play you a little bit of this one, Dame de qui toute ma joie vient, which means lady from which all my joy comes. And it gets even more lovely as it goes on. Highly recommend you listen to all those as well. And that is a very brief introduction to Guillaume de Machaut, most famous composer of the medieval period. Brings us right up to the Renaissance, which is the subject of our next video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.